My name is Scout Stevenson. I'll be presenting tonight at the Harvard iLab. I'm a creative director working for ExtensionEngine, and we'll be discussing user experience design and introduction. This presentation will cover the best practices, the process, and the associated deliverables with good user experience design.
Tonight, I'm really excited to introduce Scout Stevenson, who is the creative director of ExtensionEngine, which is a software product development firm. And he is an expert in user experience design. He also is a professor at Boston University and teaches on the subject as well, and is giving up an evening over there to teach you guys tonight. So I'm really excited to present Scout Stevenson.
Thanks for the introduction. So tonight we're going to, they asked me to come and speak on user experience design. I don't know how much, I'm sure people have, there's a variety of knowledge here. And it can go pretty deep. There's some parts of it that's very subjective. Everyone kind of has their own process. It gets confused with user experience, user interaction design. It gets confused with web design. So the goal of tonight is to, what it says, it's an introduction, so we're just going to cover sort of an intro to user experience design, talk about some best practices, process, and some deliverables. So I'm Scout Stevenson, as Jody mentioned. I work at ExtensionEngine. ExtensionEngine actually is seated here, at least part of us, in the iLab. We're a mobile and software web app development company, and we have about 18 people that sit in the Northeast, and probably about 12 of them here, and then we have 100 developers who sit in a town called Split in Croatia, and that's where all of our development and production is done. And there's just some interior glamour shots of ExtensionEngine. So here's tonight's agenda. We'll talk. We'll define user experience. There's a lot of definitions out there, and so my goal for you guys is to at least start the process of distilling it and crystallizing it where it maybe makes a little more sense. There's something called the 5 planes of user experience, and we'll go through that with some associated examples and artifacts. I was at a client meeting, I don't know, about a year ago, and there was some of the CX level management was in the meeting, and we were talking about user experience, and they were, the CX level people were questioning, well, why do we have to do this experience part of the project? Why can't we just, skip over that and, get to the meat and potatoes? And so the takeaway there is that there's, in the corporate world, in many companies, there's they don't have a way to measure the value of user experience. So we'll talk a little bit about what the value is. We'll talk about process, some artifacts, what makes up a user experience team, and then just some interesting resources that I thought would be interesting for everyone. Then we'll have Q&A. So who gains the most from user experience design? So once again, more like an introduction slide for you guys. Any teams that are building complex, rich experiences. So, if you're just building a simple 15-page corporate, nice-looking website that's just more informational-centric, it's probably not too heavy on the experience design. But if you're building a site that has some transactional properties, such as an Amazon, or maybe not that big, e-commerce, does something other than just offer up information in an aesthetically pleasing way. User experiences for the team that's working on that. They probably have a user experience on the team. Startups, and this may seem like an unlikely group that could benefit from a user experience design, but as we all know, startups have less people and everyone has to wear more hats. And if you're given the choice, I know I would make the choice. If you're given the choice between a designer who's a good designer, competent, has a great portfolio, knows what they're doing, or a designer who actually has worked on some more experiential projects and sites, I would pick the latter. And it's like getting two people for the price of one. So people who are entrepreneurial and starting up companies, they would do well in getting someone who has some user experience design. Maybe there's some people here, existing professionals who want to integrate or user experience into some of their projects or some process into their company, or want to find out a little bit more about it. I'm sure there's some people here. Any stakeholders involved in any applicable project that wants to learn techniques to make them work more effectively. So an example of that is ExtensionEngine has several clients where they're product clients, and we on a regular basis will do what we call a user experience boot camp for them, where we'll have them in for a half a day or a day, and we'll actually go through tasks and deliverables and workshops and card sorting and all the other sort of interactions that go with user experience design, so that they understand the process, they understand best practices, and that their interactions with us as we move toward a new product are just that much more efficient. So what is user experience? So everyone, I Googled this just so that I can make this point. If you type that in, you'll get, there's not enough hours in the year to go through them all, but everyone has, slightly different definition of what user experience is. And what ExtensionEngine user experience is it's when the goals of a user align with the goals of a business. And that doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be a good user experience. It could be a crappy user experience. Think of your grandmother's VCR. No one still knows how to program them, so that's a bad user experience. But a positive user experience is when the goals of the user and the goals of the organization that are creating the product are met. If they're not met, then either the users don't understand what their goals are, what they should do, and vice versa. So I like to put every analogy into some sort of a mathematical equation. So here we go. So business goals plus user goals plus user interface plus technology equals user experience. In the UX world, there's a process and an artifact that's well known by everyone called the 5 planes of UX, and it's a way to start to break down the basic steps of how to develop a UX, into sort of a cohesive framework. So I always find the chart, and it's the same chart everywhere, and I always find it kind of it's not very client friendly, but hopefully the way we break it down will make sense. So there's 5 planes to in the user experience process. There's working from the bottom toward the top. There's strategy, and we'll go through each of these in a moment. There's strategy. There's scope, structure, skeleton, and surface. And going from abstract to concrete probably doesn't mean much now, but it will once we get through this. So those are the 5 steps that are used to help break down the developing a user experience, and each one has associated tasks and deliverables. And so let's go through that. We'll come back to that in a second. So I thought just for a contextual example to use while describing these steps, I thought I would use Amazon. I think it's safe to assume that everyone knows Amazon. So in the strategy phase, it's really about it's what we were talking about before, business goals and user goals. So it's about what's the reason for the site? It's like the big question. What's the purpose? Why are we here? What are we creating? Why are we creating it? What are the goals? So in this case, we can pretend that it's Amazon is 20 years ago talking about this. It's this part of the this first plane strategy where we're starting to define what the users want, what the businesses want, or the product. And I think so as we're developing the big goal and the purpose for whatever we're creating, and as we're starting to define what the users want and define what the businesses want, we're trying to create that, the beginning of aligning the business goals with the user goals. So I think in this case, it's it's safe to assume in the Amazon example that users want to purchase books. I know they can purchase a lot more, but it's a hypothetical example. And that Amazon wants to sell books and sell more books and sell more stuff. So this is a good example of distilling down, what the goals of the user and what the goals of the business or the product happens to be. Next, we move on to the second plane, which is called scope. And scope is really the migration of the strategy that we talked about earlier here into what we call requirements. So now that we've figured out what the purpose of this particular site or product is, we've figured out what the main goals of the user are. We've figured out what the main goals of the site or the product are. Now we need to start work on requirements. So it's getting a little bit less abstract and a little bit more tactical. So in this phase, we're developing task and user stories. So what a user story, it's a UX term, but what it really means is, if we're all here developing a site like Amazon, what do we want the users to be able to accomplish on the site? What are all the things we want them to be able to do? Knowing the users, and it's really, it's very important to really, this process is not to just go through a process, it's to really identify the users and develop the right tasks. Knowing them and providing the right tasks will directly, affect profit. And not knowing them and or not providing, the right tasks, and we'll get into exactly what tasks are, will directly affect profit and thus the user experience. So I thought with each of these, I define them and then just go into a simple example. So this is an artifact of a user story matrix, and so this is where we would define all the different types of users. Talk a little bit about their personas. So it could be college students. It could be business people. It could be gift givers. There's a bunch of different users in the case of Amazon. And so this is where we start to analyze and annotate different users and what tasks they should be doing. So let's, a simple user story is we can assume that users, in this case, want to search for books. So these are just some tasks. Read about and compare books. View books, recommendations. We've all done this, save to a wish list. Get shipping estimates. Purchase using credit and debit card. And I know it's very elementary, it's very simple, and there's probably enough tasks to wallpaper the room as well. But so this is how the user stories start to begin, and the tasks that we want users to be able to do. So if we don't nail these tasks, another one we could add in there is make checkout in as few clicks as possible. If we develop these tasks and we don't pay these tasks off in the next steps to come, then the user experience starts to fall apart. Third step, or the third plane, is called structure, and this is where things start to get a little bit more, little less abstract and a little bit more tactical. This is where we start to develop the taxonomy. So we've developed the big goal, in this case for Amazon, is users want to buy books and Amazon wants to sell books. We talked about the different types of users and their tasks, what we want the users to be able to do on the site. And now that we've agreed on that, we need to actually start to blow out this taxonomy here of where do things live? What sections are there? What are we calling it? So how do all the pieces start to fit together and behave? How do the users find what they're looking for in an intuitive way? What's the flow of actions and interactions throughout the site? So starting to just come up with silos and taxonomies of alike type information and what's bucketed under that, and how do people traverse from one area to another. So and there's many other documents that are part of the structure phase. This is just a simple sitemap. So structure artifacts, some other artifacts in the structure phase are what you just saw as a site map. There's something called mind maps, which are maps that are less about content and more about trying to make a roadmap of particular users and the experiences that they want to encounter. There's flow maps. In this case, this is a very simple flow map. So get on a computer, go to Amazon, search for the book. Is it in stock? Yes. Click add to cart. No. Go somewhere else. So for any kind of rich sites, especially e-commerce sites, is something we call it the buy flow. So it's a particular flow. There's particular doors that we want users to come in. There's particular behaviors we want them to exhibit at certain points in the site. We want to corral and flow them a certain way to the point where they can check out and their book will be shipped to them. And remember, this is all part of mapping. Amazon has sold a book, and the user has just hopefully easily purchased the book. So once again, another artifact that's just ensuring that the initial user experience that we defined is getting paid off. The fourth plane is called skeleton, believe it or not. And this is where, what we've just done before this is created a taxonomy, and we've created buckets and groupings of content and where things live, and some sort of user flows about how people are going to find the information that they want. And once we've nailed that down, then we go on to the skeleton phase, where it's about actually starting to create. Think about it's a blueprint. We're trying to, knowing what we want them to do. Now we have to create the pages and the information and put it in the right place so that when they're traversing, they find exactly what they need on pages. So we call this a wireframe. So it starts to answer questions. Very simple things. What elements are on a page, and these aren't labeled, but there's some promos here. It looks like there's a video here. There's all these little things here, little calls to action that buy now or learn more, things like that. So where do the buttons go? How much copy is there? What types of call to actions are there? So as I said earlier, wireframes are a blueprint for the site pages and the site for the site. I'm sorry. And anyone who's in the industry knows as well that when we're showing this artifact to a client, we purposely don't put any color, any logos, any real type. They're like this, and even this confuses many clients because they think that that's a proposed color palette of two tones of gray. So we keep design completely out of it because if you did put a color there, you'll 9 times out of 10 you'll side rail the meeting, and you'll definitely pick the color that the client hates the most, and they won't be able to get off that. So what we want people to do here is to concentrate on what content's on the page, what's the relative hierarchy as compared to other pieces of content, what are the calls to action, how big are things, where does the button go, things like that. And so in the skeleton phase, there's, like the other phases, there's many artifacts. So there's what we call lo-fi artifacts or lo-fi wireframes. So it means exactly what you think it means. It means that they're not hi-fi, they're not high fidelity, they're low fidelity. So this is an example of a low fidelity wireframe. It's a hand sketch. It's actually a nice hand sketch, but it's a hand sketch. It's static, doesn't do much except just show the particular content for that page. So anything that's static or hand sketched would fall into lo-fi, and hi-fi would be if you actually made this clickable. If you actually coded it up in CSS and did simple little HTML wireframes that look just like that, but they were actually interactive. Those would be examples of hi-fi deliverables and artifacts. My favorite phase is the surface phase, because that means you're almost done with the project and you're ready for the next one. So the surface phase, this is where all the everything is built up to this point. So you have what the goals are, you know what the user's goals are, you know what the business or the product goals are, you know the user flows, you know the taxonomy, you know the page requirements, what's going to be on the page, what's going to be a button, how big is it going to be, and then this is where you actually put the you know the design veneer on top of it. So this is where the design starts to come in. So it's a visual interface tier that ties all the other components together. So this this sits on top of that wireframe that you just saw. This is where we're, you know, all these other disciplines have been off, you know, working in parallel with you, but you know, the content person's been off developing the content for the site. The designers have been off working on all the design elements of the site. You know, if your company's large enough and you have a you know, color anthropologist, maybe they're off working on colors, you know, developing what typefaces, what's going to be HTML, what's going to be a graphic. You know, the brand person has talked about, you know, what the brand or the personality of the site should be. In this case, it's a very utility-driven site that's clean. And then, of course, you know, what images go on there, where are the buttons, how big are the buttons. So this is where all the graphical veneer goodness comes together. So just, you know, a simple example, it goes from skeleton to surface. And that's actually, this is the current Amazon site, and the wireframe behind it is a current wireframe as of midday a couple days ago. So as I mentioned, it's getting easier and easier to sell in user experience components into projects because I don't know, maybe Apple has something to do with that. You know, I think the majority of people understand that that good experiences actually matter. You know, they help brand and they increase profits. And but even when we go into client presentations, I mean, we don't show this deck, but we have a couple of pages that talk about you know, ways to think about how to measure and how to validate user experience, just to make sure that they understand the value. So a good user experience will positively affect how people feel about site or product, and you know, that leads to increased sales and conversions. And of course, hopefully no one will debate hard with me on that. Some of this is sort of assumption-centric, just to get the point across. Increase repeat visits to the site and encourage it to others. I mean, I think all of us in the room, whenever we find you know, either a quirky, kind of a cool site, or we've had a good experience shopping or whatever, you know, we're always emailing or Facebooking it or telling our friends, you know, hey, you know, check out the site. You know, it was a good experience. And then one other thing that a lot of people don't think about, and it obviously depends on the particular project and client, is that you know, a good site can reduce support costs. So I think the Apple site actually, you know, I was trying to figure out before the presentation how to those slides that were looping, and I couldn't figure it out. So I had a bad user experience with Keynote. This is on Apple's Keynote. But when I went to Apple site and went to the support section, I had a good user experience because it said you're an idiot, just click on this button and they'll loop, and it did. So you know, that I don't think I would have called Apple and asked them, but you know, joke intended. It's just that good user experience and can actually you know, generate higher customer satisfaction and lower support costs. You know, if you have an issue with Comcast or RCN or those types of places, and I don't think they have very good user experiences, but if they did, they could probably, you know, get rid of half of their the people that take those calls every day. So I put together just 2 pages, 2 different sites of just to sort of give you an example, at least through my lens, you know, a good user experience and a bad user experience. So yellowpages.com, this is their previous site. This is not the one that's up now. This was up, I don't know, about 9 months ago. And I actually used it a couple of times as well. And I read online that the goal for this particular iteration of the site was to to be a utility for quickly finding information in as few clicks as possible. So somewhere in one of those one of the earlier UX steps that we were discussing, someone presumably was sitting around a table and said, hey, we want a site that, we just want it to be, a tool that's easy to use, let people get numbers in as few clicks as possible. And I thought it did a good job, it's very utility driven, right? It even has some, it exposes a lot of information that you don't have to dig for, simple tabs to get to tools and popular categories and find and locate, and it's very, it's a tool, and I thought they did a good job. And then when they redesigned it, this is the current site, and the designer in me says it's a pretty site. It has a nice grid, everyone likes squares. The images look nice. It's colorful. Looks like there's a lot going on. So in that case, I think not knowing the goals, I think it worked. I think it's a beautiful site. But knowing the goals, I think it's actually starting to step on them a little bit. Up in the main nav that we just looked at earlier, they had something called More Tools and Search Tips, which they removed on this redesign. Why, I don't know. And then they have these images, which it does like an IP detect and or will ask you where you're located, and so it peppers these ads and that they're making revenue off of that are locality based that come up. And while they look good, I think they start to at least distract me from quickly, in as few clicks as possible, finding the number. Debatable, but I think they based upon that goal, I think they went backwards. Based upon no goals, aesthetically it looks nice. And then the second experience that I thought would be interesting to call out is, does anyone know who Square is? Do people know? Yeah. So they're a digital payment app, and actually Toscanini's over in Central Square, unfortunately, is one of the few places around here that maybe they've expanded in the last month, but they actually use Square there. And what's that? Starbucks. Oh, they use Square? Oh, beautiful. I didn't know that. So this was their original site about a year ago, and it rotated through automatically, or you could click in these different sections, and it still doesn't look like any other site. I think it's a really high production value, gorgeous site. But their goal, like many apps, is it's all about conversion. You can find any information you want anywhere you want. But the goal of the site is to sign up users. That's the only goal for this site. So the goal is to convert new users, both businesses and consumers. And based upon knowing what that goal is, I find this site, takes sort of the long path to that. Things are rotating. You have to wait till you get to the right slide that has interesting content on it that will make you click. Here it's about learning more. So it's more exploratory, and I never quite thought that what I know the goals of the site to be aligned with the actual user experience. But in their current site, which is up right now, I think the goal is absolutely aligned. Right? You come here, it's start accepting credit cards today. It doesn't get any simpler than that. Sign up, get a free card reader. They practically did it for you. There's nothing else to do. And they do it in a nice, clean, impactful way. And then up above, which I think is brilliant, is that they quickly vet users. So whoever the user is, they can see, oh, Square Wallet, well, that's me, I'm a consumer. Square Register, well, that's someone who, like Toscanini's or the B2B play who's interested in that option. So they don't even have to say, hey, consumers click here or businesses click there. You just know, and it's you can do everything that they want you to do from this one page. So I think that's a user experience that went in the up direction, positive direction. So these are all the UX processes. This is 5 minutes of. So when I typed in UX process, here's what I got. And I actually had 3 times as many in there, but it was slowing the presentation down, so I took them out. But that doesn't matter. The takeaway is that everyone has a process, and everyone's is different. And I think the reason that they're different is you're going to have a slightly different process if you're creating like a physical product, like an iPhone. So if you're creating an iPhone, a physical product experience, your process may be a little bit different, a little bit tweaked to creating a physical product. If you're creating digital experiences like mobile apps and websites, your process will be slightly different. If you're creating, there's people who create experiences for when they create a new building or they put up a new wing to an airport. There's people who do experiences of just what does it feel like to walk through there? Do you intuitively know where to go? There's service experience companies who design experiences around customer service. How do people answer? If you call into some support line, how do they answer? What do they say? How do they quickly get the problem out of you and get you to the next person? So there's all kinds of different experiences. So I think that's one reason for why the processes and the charts that you see for the processes are all a little bit different. I also think every individual agency kind of has their own take on it. It's a little subjective. There's a little bit of gray area there. Agencies and companies also like to proprietize things. They go into a client and they say, hey, with our 5-step process, we'll get you to market in, no time at all. And so they may actually, call the different sections of the process different things to make it more proprietary and more sort of their own. What someone might call a research phase, someone else might call an analyze phase. So this is our process at ExtensionEngine. So we have 5 phases. We have, you can read it for yourself: research, strategy, implement, deploy, and then measure, optimize. And each one of these, each phase of this process, there is an associated list of tasks that we actually do, and associated deliverables for those tasks. And the deck will be provided. I don't need to read every single little line, but basically in the research phase, that's what we were talking about earlier with the 5 planes of UX, and that's where we go in. We're seeing what the client's been doing. We'll do like an audit of competitive analysis. We'll interview some of their current users. We'll do some thinking about the different types of users. It's where we're kind of ramping up and trying to figure out, get all of our sort of strategy and goal information packaged up so that we can get the client to agree on that and then move on to the next phase. And then in the strategy phase, we're assuming we get approval from the research phase, we're developing UX strategy. We're doing some working sessions with the client to kind of ideate, what we're going to do, what the product should do. We're doing user flows and stories that we talked about earlier. We're developing personas. Who are the different users who are going to be using this? Are they single white female, 18 to 27, drives a Jetta and works, makes this much money and drinks 2 Starbucks coffees a day. So we're trying to really get to know what the users are in the strategy phase. We go into the implement phase, and that's where it gets a little more tactical. We're doing visual design, we're doing information architecture, some storyboarding. That's where a significant portion of the development takes place. And then it's the deploy phase where it might actually be the final product, or it might just be a quick iteration, but we're ready to release and do some testing, do some interviews, see how people are liking it, some usability testing, and then almost like everything that we do, we'll measure and optimize. So what did the usability testing show? 9 out of 10 people didn't know how to get past the splash screen. Hopefully not. People complained of this. People were stuck on that. People really love this, and they really got that. So it's both the good and the bad. And then we'll talk about next steps. We'll iterate and make changes, and then redeploy. So that's in a nutshell, that's our process. And these are some of the UX deliverables and artifacts. These may be some terms that you heard, some things that we discussed tonight. So there's a lot of artifacts associated with it. Design, reports, documentation, optimization, creative strategies, page flows, personas, user flows. So these are I thought it'd be nice to just provide, and I still think there's a few more we can put on there, but just a list of artifacts and documents that we use in order to traverse through the user experience process so that we can get to a user experience where the businesses and the users' goals are met. So depending on the firm or company that's doing the user experience, if they're as I touched on earlier, if they're a small shop, the person who is the information architect might also be the visual designer. If they're a larger shop, they might actually have, each of these would be a separate person or a separate discipline. And if they're, if they're a 50-plus shop, these would actually be departments. But generally speaking, in the UX world, the team is comprised of an experience director. So that's I play that role quite often, and that's someone who works with the team in creating user experiences. So as a director, I spend a lot of my time client-facing. So I still push pixels so I can keep it fresh, but I spend a lot of my time client-facing, talking about business strategies, and then converting those business strategies into user experience solutions, or working with my team to convert them. There's people who are thinking about nothing except what the content is for a particular initiative. There's visual designers who are, who are different than experience designers. The experienced people are thinking about what's the experience, who is the user, how are they going to flow through a particular, experience. What are the tasks? What do we want them to do? The visual designers are more, sort of screws and bolts. They're developing, the color palette. They're developing all the elements and the buttons and the graphical veneer that goes over the experience. There's information architects who are putting together the taxonomies, the user flows, and any of the sort of fancy schematics that you see. There's front-end developers who are working on anything that the user sees. They've coded or developed. So they're the people who are working in whatever they need to work in. HTML, HTML5, JavaScript, Ajax, any kind of front-end programming language. There's if it's an e-commerce site, there's obviously a back-end component to it too, right? There's the transactional properties. There's the purchase engine. There's the inventory and the database. So if it's a site like that, then there would also be what we call a back-end developer who's building all the stuff that the user doesn't see, but that funnels up or pipes up through the front-end design. Usability specialist. So that's someone whose job is to think about what's the usability of the site, and they'll use a variety of diagrams or tools and artifacts to rate how a user, how the usability of the site is. Is it easy to, they'll set up sort of initiatives or tasks to do on the site, like go and buy a book, and they might use some. They might use a lab where they're actually with a moderator, and they're actually running people through these tasks to see how they do. They might do like retina tracking to see where people are looking on the site. So they're just, all they're concerned about is is the site usable, and if not, what are the issues, so that we can go back and iterate and hopefully make it usable. And then user testing moderator. So we, on some of our larger initiatives, we'll do user testing. Sometimes that's, we'll give people a $25 Starbucks gift card and have them come in and sit down, and we'll give them sort of tasks to do. And other times we might use the lab at Bentley, who has a great usability lab, and we'll record the session. We'll have a moderator. It's like two-way glass, and once again we'll give them tasks to do, and then they'll do the tasks, and then we'll have a debrief with them, ask them why they did this, why didn't they do that, so that we can really figure out, where usability is excelling and where it's lacking. So that's a typical UX team. And there's a lot of resources out there. These are some that I used a couple of these just to sort of confirm some stats that I had, and these are others that I go to as well to to sync up with either processes that are going on or other people in the industry. And that's it. So, questions? Yeah, so the question was tips or tricks on how to best convert people, right? I haven't spent a lot of time on, actually I spent a lot of time on Groupon in a 24-hour period, but you know, I guess one tip is that you know, people, even myself, want to naturally just put everything about their company on the front page. You know, just this is our name, here's our huge logo, and you know, this is what we do, and here's our value. Like, they want to just load the front page with tons of stuff, and in fact, it depends on the company. But if it's a company that's about getting users, because users, you know, equals like valuation, you know, and they may have to get their second round of funding or what have you, and you know, if they have like 500,000 users, that looks a lot better than if you have like 2,500 users. So, you know, trying to take some of that off the site so that they can just figure out what, you know, just have the site function as it's supposed to function, but still having what we call paths or ways for the user to migrate to other content if they want to find out like about the company, if they want to find out more about why they might have a unique value proposition. So, and that's really hard to do. I mean, and actually to the earlier lady's question about like a contractor, you know, contractor versus a company, depending on the contractor, they may not have the wherewithal to push back on someone. You know, they might just be more in the do it mode. You know, the company says, this is what we want, and they're like, okay, yeah, I'll do that. And whereas a company, because we're using best practices and we've, you know, you could assume we're seasoned, you know, well, we're known for, especially, you know, me, pushing back on clients. And not, you have to be a jerk about it, you just like, you just present strategy why they wouldn't want to do that. We just finished with a client who's doing it's like a wellness site. You log in and you can track what you eat and how much exercise, and it comes up with charts and things like that. And they came to us and they have, you know, the site was actually fairly nice looking, but they had a whole block of copy, and they said, no, this has to be here, this has to be here. You know, they wouldn't know what we do if it wasn't here. And you know, it took a little hand holding, but we got that off, and we actually just had, you know, sign up now for, you know, yada yada. You know, want to know what it is? Learn more. And then, you know, so people could go that way. I also think, you know, having the right graphical elements, I think, you know, if it's about converting people or getting people to buy something, I don't think you want a bunch of different buttons. You know, you don't want to confuse the user. We think about it as like a path. And so when the user comes here, we want the user, do we want them to buy a book, or do we want them to find out more about the company? Because they're two different things. Buying a book will be, you know, we'll use a button, even down to like an arrow that feels like an e-commerce arrow. I don't know, you know, if you go home and check it out, look at different sites. Arrows that are about finding more information on a company versus an arrow or a button that's about purchasing something, they feel completely different. To me, they're like night and day. So even down to like the sort of the psychographics behind like a button and how big the button is and what does the arrow look like. So I think you know, it comes down to strategically what information to be on the page or not on the page, and also you know, the elements that you use, because believe it or not, we're all trained to like recognize these in sort of cognitively without even thinking about it. But that's a couple ways. How do I measure user experience? Well, there's several ways you can measure it. You can measure it based upon user adoption. So if you put something out there and you know, assuming it's actually out in the public, if people adopt it and people are using it, you know, that could be like downloads or signups, or you know, if it's an app, you know, downloads. So user adoption is one metric. If no one's using it, then it's not. You know, it's a low measurement. You can do focus groups to find out, you know, what if you know, and ask them questions such as, does this, this site is about, kind of like I did up there, this site is about being a utility toward yada, yada, yada. Does it feel like that or not? No, it doesn't. Why not? And, get those answers from them. You ask that, 25, 30 people, and you add it up, and then you might start to see some patterns. And, everyone said, hey, the value promise doesn't map to the homepage or the site design. Why not? Because I didn't see a next button, or I didn't get this paid off. So you can do focus groups to measure. You can do follow user adoption. You can do everyone knows you can do Google Analytics and see how people come into your site. How long did they stay there? What page did they go to? What's the drop-off rate? So there's different ways to measure. For site mapping and user flows, there's a lot of products out there. I use one called MindJet, and it's a great product. They have like new release every year, and it's really, really easy to use. And you can make you can make a site map for United Airlines. I've done it just as an exercise, and it's the size of the screen at 10-point type. It's huge, but you can make that in like 2 hours. So MindJet for that. Camtasia is we don't really. I guess I don't think about that as being a user experience software. That's a software where a lot of people on YouTube use it. It's where you can record what you're doing on your screen. So you can be like, hey, tonight I'm gonna, show you how to make a kite, and go through the steps, and you can record whatever is on your screen, and people will post that to YouTube. So I don't think about that as a user experience, but like card sorting or like card scenarios, and IDEO is a famous user experience agency, and they actually sell those cards. And they also have an app for $5 that you can buy as well. But I bought the physical cards. Balsamiq actually lets you create wireframes. So those would be hi-fi prototypes. And on their screen, on their homepage, they show samples of the wireframes in using like a font called Lemonade, which looks like a kid's font. And just actually what I said earlier, it didn't feel professional enough to put in front of a client, but that was just a crappy template that someone made a bad judgment call on to use on the homepage, because when I looked at their templates, they had really nice templates. So Balsamiq we like Balsamiq a lot. So it's a program that lets you, drag components of a wireframe. Maybe it's a big box, or a headshot or a movie. Just those gray boxes that we looked at earlier. It lets you drag them onto a page and make multiple pages, and you can link those pages to each other. So it's like a hi-fi wireframe tool that you can use. I like that quite a bit. Only the most savvy clients really know who their users are. A lot of them, one of the mistakes is they think they know who the users are, and what they confuse is they confuse what they think their experience should be with what a user's experience should be, right? So they're thinking from their footsteps instead of their user's footsteps. If you're creating some sort of rich site, the discovery phase, or the research, the analyze or research phase, even I call it multiple things, that's typically about 6 weeks. And that builds in time for multiple reviews. That builds in time for us if we have to do interviews. It builds in, gives them a few days to actually understand what we're presenting back to them and actually think about it. So that process is typically 5 to 6 weeks. And if it's a simple little site or project, it might be like 3 to 4 weeks, but typically it's 5 to 6 weeks. And the other processes could go out, the one that I was talking about earlier, that went out a year. But a typical sort of site that has some back-end functionality, some data analytics, it actually does something, is typically 3 to 4.5 month project, assuming there's no blockers and it's not like a gigantic initiative. He wants to know how teams that are doing Agile Design commingle with teams that are doing the regular process. So Agile Design is, we saw the UX process and we assume that we're building, it could be a mobile app, it could be a website, and it takes a certain amount of time and there's a certain amount of phases. So Agile, what they call Agile Design, is it's almost like a mini process within the overall process where there's instead of waiting for that whole 3 months to test and see how see if things are going to go well. Hopefully they will, because we have a nice process and we're using best practices and we have artifacts all to hopefully ensure that. But there arises sometimes where we'll do something called like Agile Design or Agile Process, which is while the longer process is going on, in the middle there might be, let me see if I can just call it up here. So this is 4 to 6 weeks, and this is depending on the project, several more weeks. And so there's like upfront research, there's some strategy. Deliverables and artifacts, this is where the rubber meets the road, and there's, you're starting to get less abstract, more concrete. You're actually starting to put some designs together. This is where you do testing, and then this is where it goes out, and then you kind of measure, see how things are going, and then maybe come back in and do some of these phases over again. So Agile Design is if you want to do quick multiple iterations of a product before it gets to this point. So right in here, as we're going along, we may have and there's different ways to slice and dice this, but we may have UX people and designers who are just business as usual, working along, going keeping their they're on the runway, just going down. But we may have a separate designer or a separate team of designers who are and we just did this on a project 6 months ago where we'll quickly mock up like something that's less polished and more rough. A particular page or a particular interaction, and we actually may test that with some users. So we may actually do surveys or have a quick focus group or post it for friends and family, to see like, hey, listen, we'll just use the example. Here's the start screen or a home page or a checkout page. We'll develop it and quickly iterate a design, and we'll actually test it right in here. And we'll get quick feedback, and we'll make those changes. And actually, I did that at Lycos. We were remember them? They had a whole business furniture section. And we would quickly mock up these screens to show like a thumbnail, a desk, and buy now, and more information. And then they have a lab there. So we'd go into the lab, and they'd bring people in for lunch, give them $25 and give them lunch, and we'd say, hey, listen, go buy a desk. And we test it out, and they either would or wouldn't. We'd analyze the path that they did, and we'd ask them questions. And then after that, we'd get together and say, hey, listen, 9 out of 10 people didn't even see this button. Like, how much bigger can it be? Well, maybe it's not the button issue. Maybe it's in the wrong part of the page. So we go back literally that same day, and we'd start moving components around and tweaking the design. Very next day, we'd have more people come in for lunch. We'd see if that helped, improve the task. So we do this for like 2 weeks, every other day for 2 weeks, until people loved it. Meanwhile, the sort of the other team is going along with business as usual. They're doing the rest of the design, and then eventually, whenever we're testing this sort of these artifacts from this agile process, we'll catch up with the other people and actually implement that. You want to know how this changes if we're doing mobile? Yeah. It actually doesn't change that much. I mean, when we're doing we might call storyboarding. We might call that something different. Or instead of doing, some of the terms may change, but the foundation of the exercise, the tasks that we're doing, are pretty much the same. We may call them something different. We use the same process almost for whatever we develop. We may call them slightly different things internally. We may not do certain, like we may not do storyboarding for certain mobile apps, either due to scope or whatever the particular app is. But for the most part, it's really, I mean, if you break it down, it's doing this upfront research, it's developing, who the users are, how they're gonna traverse through there, doing development. there may be other sort of prongs off of development, right? So there may be development with the Android iOS, there may be with the Apple iOS instead of, we probably don't use information architecture. We don't call it that a lot with mobile apps. We don't think about it as far as like those types of pages. We still call them wireframes, but we think more about sort of screen flows. So I'd say for the most part, the process stays as is. Flipboard, I think, was the first to the mat, and the interesting thing about Flipboard is that in doing that product, they created these navigational paradigms that never existed, right? So, I mean, forget the flipping. The flipping actually is nice. I mean, but that's been around since Flash, 4.0, flip pages. But the way that you go throughout there, where you'll click, it'll be the integration of social media and other stories, and you would click on something, and the page would slide over, and then if you want more details, the page would slide up, and then if you wanted more details, then it would say, I think it says linking to outer page, and then that goes away, the other page goes down, you go back, and just the way that they're they're going to like a quaternary level of information, in I think a really organized, intuitive, simple way. I mean, I spent hours looking at Flipboard, Google's actually not bad, but I think it's interesting that you brought it up, because I think that Flipboard, they had to figure it out. They were like, all right, how do we get to quaternary or even 5 levels of information drilling down without it just being like a mess? And the way that the screens move and how screens tier up on other screens, and keeping that really simple back to home on the top left, I think they did a great job. And now you're seeing that everywhere. So that, and also I know this wasn't part of your question, but Pinterest also has a really is it Pinterest or is it Path? Pinterest, where it's a mobile app, and many mobile apps that you'll see have like those icons at the bottom that say settings and more, and I don't know, reload my card or whatever it says along the bottom. But Pinterest took all of that and they put it into just a single little button in the top left that holds all that information. And now you're starting to see that. I saw it in an application called Path, and I think some version of AOL Instant Messenger app that I saw uses it. So now everyone, you click it and they all like kind of come out in an arc. And so, it's always nice to see, I mean, those are like the true leaders, it's nice to see those new paradigms. All right. Well, I could either do puppet shows or I could say thank you. So, thanks.